I knew something was wrong the moment my name disappeared from the presentation screen at the annual gala. 300 employees sat beneath crystal chandeliers inside a downtown Chicago ballroom, applauding as my coworker, Ethan Mercer, walked onto the stage to accept an innovation award for a project I had spent 11 exhausting months building. I stayed seated at table 17, my hands folded calmly in my lap while my stomach twisted into knots. Ethan smiled for photos, thanked leadership for trusting his vision, and even repeated ideas that had come directly from meetings I personally led. Around me, coworkers exchanged uncomfortable glances but said nothing. My director stared at the stage with obvious pride, as if everything had unfolded exactly as planned. Then Ethan pointed toward the giant screen behind him, where slides containing my research, my forecasts, and my strategy appeared without my name attached to a single page. I remember hearing the applause, but what I noticed most was the silence from the people who knew the truth. They expected anger. They expected tears. They expected me to walk out. Instead, I remained perfectly still. Because 20 minutes earlier, while everyone was preparing for dinner, the CEO had quietly received an email containing the original project thread. And he had already opened it. I was 28 years old and worked as a senior business analyst for a fast-growing logistics company that loved talking about integrity, almost as much as it loved rewarding the wrong people. When I joined 3 years earlier, I quickly learned that visibility mattered more than effort. The loudest voices received recognition, while the people doing the actual work were expected to stay grateful for their paychecks. I wasn't loud. I preferred detailed reports, documented decisions, and measurable results. That approach earned respect from clients but rarely attracted attention inside the office. Ethan understood the system far better than I did. He was charismatic, polished, and knew exactly how to position himself near executives whenever something successful happened. Over time, he developed a habit of presenting team accomplishments as if they had originated from him. Most people noticed it. Few challenged it. Then our company landed the largest client contract in its history, and I was assigned to lead the strategy project that could determine whether we expanded nationally. For nearly a year, I worked late nights, managed vendor negotiations, built forecasting models, and documented every decision through email. By the time the gala arrived, I believed the results would finally speak for themselves. What I didn't realize was that someone had already decided whose name would receive the credit. The project officially began on January 8th. The same Monday, executives announced the company's expansion initiative. The objective sounded simple during the kickoff meeting: create a logistics framework capable of supporting growth into 12 new markets within 18 months. In reality, it involved thousands of moving parts, dozens of vendors, compliance requirements across multiple states, and a client whose expectations changed almost weekly. My director assigned me as project lead because I had managed similar transitions before. Ethan was listed as a supporting analyst. At the time, I thought nothing of it. During the first few months, everything seemed professional. I scheduled meetings, distributed action items, maintained documentation, and sent weekly updates to leadership. Ethan attended most meetings but rarely contributed anything substantial. Still, he had a talent for speaking confidently about work completed by other people. Whenever executives joined calls, he suddenly became the most active person in the room. I noticed it. Everyone noticed it. Yet nobody challenged him because his behavior always remained just subtle enough to avoid direct accusations. By April, the project had become the company's highest priority. I was regularly arriving before 7 in the morning and leaving after 8 at night. My apartment looked abandoned. My social life disappeared. Some weeks I spent more time reviewing shipping data than sleeping. What kept me going was the belief that the final result would justify the sacrifice. Every recommendation, every budget adjustment, and every strategic decision was documented through email. I kept records because I valued organization, not because I expected to need protection. Looking back, those records became the most important decision I ever made. The first warning sign appeared in June. During a leadership meeting, our vice president praised Ethan for a vendor optimization strategy one had personally developed. I remember sitting at the conference table waiting for Ethan to correct the misunderstanding. He never did. Instead, he nodded and said, "I'm glad the team supported the direction." The wording bothered me. Not because he openly lied, but because he carefully allowed others to reach the wrong conclusion. After the meeting, several coworkers approached me privately. One of them asked, "Are you okay with what just happened?" I smiled and replied, "The work speaks for itself." At the time I believed that. Throughout the summer, the pattern continued. Presentations I created suddenly appeared in executive meetings with Ethan presenting them. Reports I authored circulated without my name attached. Meeting summaries I distributed were referenced as examples of Ethan's leadership. Each incident seemed small when viewed individually. Together, they painted a very different picture. By September, I realized something larger was happening. Leadership no longer viewed me as the architect of the project. They viewed me as support staff. Ethan had gradually positioned himself as the visible face of the initiative, while I remained behind the scenes handling the difficult work. One afternoon, I accidentally received a calendar invitation intended for senior managers. The subject line read, "Gala Recognition Planning." Curious, I opened it. Inside was a list of award candidates. Ethan's name appeared under Innovation Leadership Award. Mine appeared nowhere. I stared at the screen for several seconds before quietly closing the window. That moment hurt more than I expected. Not because I wanted applause, but because it confirmed what I had suspected for months. Someone was actively rewriting the story of the project. I could have confronted Ethan immediately. I could have marched into HR or demanded explanations from leadership. Instead, I did something much simpler. I created a private folder containing every email, presentation draft, approval record, meeting summary, and timestamp connected to the project. Then I waited, because if someone was building a false narrative, eventually they would need to defend it. The closer we got to the annual gala, the more obvious the situation became. By October, executives regularly invited Ethan to meetings that I had originally established. Sometimes I learned about strategic discussions only after receiving follow-up notes. Other times, Ethan would stop by my desk asking for data, forecasts, or presentation materials, then appear in leadership briefings using those exact documents. The frustrating part was how carefully everything was designed. Nothing he did crossed a clear policy violation. There was never a single email saying he had stolen my work. Instead, he benefited from assumptions he had quietly encouraged. Most people inside the company preferred convenient stories over complicated truths. Ethan gave them a convenient story. I focused on results while he focused on visibility. In corporate environments, those are not always rewarded equally. During the second week of November, our expansion project officially launched. The rollout exceeded expectations almost immediately. Client retention increased. Shipping delays dropped. Revenue projections climbed above target. Senior leadership celebrated the success as proof that the company was ready for national growth. Emails filled inboxes. Executives congratulated one another. My team exchanged messages late into the evening. Yet something strange happened. My name appeared less and less often in conversations about the achievement. Ethan's name appeared everywhere. One Friday afternoon, I entered a conference room early for a budget review meeting. The room was empty except for my director and Ethan. Neither realized I had arrived because the door remained partially open. I heard my director say, "At the gala, make sure you emphasize your leadership role. The board loves a strong success story." Ethan laughed and replied, "Don't worry, I've got it covered." I stood silently in the hallway for several seconds. Then I walked away before either man saw me. That conversation removed any remaining doubt. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't an accident. People at the highest levels had chosen a version of events that benefited them. My director needed a rising star. Ethan wanted recognition. The truth had become inconvenient. For the first time, I considered fighting back immediately. I drafted an email to HR. I wrote another to the vice president. I even opened a blank message addressed to the CEO. Then I deleted every one of them. Emotion creates mistakes. Documentation creates leverage. I continued collecting evidence. Every project approval. Every revision history. Every email chain showing who developed strategies and when. By December, my folder contained hundreds of files. The gala arrived on a cold Thursday evening. The ballroom looked like something from a luxury magazine. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead. Live musicians played near the stage. Executives mingled with board members while photographers moved through the crowd. Everyone seemed excited. I felt strangely calm. During dinner, Ethan spent most of his time networking with leadership. Several coworkers stopped by my table and awkwardly asked whether I was excited about the awards. Their expressions told me everything. They already knew what was coming. Around 8:30, the ceremony began. Categories passed one by one until the Innovation Leadership Award appeared on the giant screen. A video montage showcased our expansion project. Every chart, every strategy graphic, every forecasting model came directly from my work. My name never appeared once. Then the announcer smiled and said, "This year's recipient is Ethan Mercer." Applause erupted across the ballroom. Ethan walked confidently toward the stage. I remained seated. My director clapped harder than anyone. Ethan accepted the award and began his speech. Halfway through, he thanked leadership for trusting him to guide the project from concept to execution. Around me, coworkers exchanged uncomfortable looks. Then something unexpected happened. At the head table, the CEO stopped clapping. He lowered his phone, and his expression changed completely. First, nobody else seemed to notice. Ethan continued speaking confidently from the stage while the audience listened politely. He described obstacles the project had overcome, lessons learned during implementation, and the importance of teamwork. Ironically, several examples he shared had come directly from conversations I documented months earlier. The room remained focused on him. My attention remained on the CEO. Just 20 minutes before the ceremony began, I had sent a final email. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't accusatory. The subject line simply read, "Expansion Project Documentation Timeline." Attached was a compressed folder containing nearly a year of records. I included meeting minutes, revision histories, approval chains, presentation drafts, vendor negotiations, and time-stamped email threads showing exactly who created every major component of the project. The message contained only 3 sentences. Before tonight's awards presentation, I believe these records may be relevant. Please review at your convenience. Thank you for your time. Then I put my phone away and joined the gala. I never expected an immediate response. CEOs receive thousands of emails. Most disappear into crowded inboxes. But apparently my timing had been fortunate. While Ethan accepted congratulations and prepared for his speech, the CEO had opened the attachment. Now he sat silently at the head table scrolling through documentation. I watched him move from file to file. Occasionally he glanced toward the stage. Each time his expression grew more serious. Ethan reached the final section of his speech and raised the Crystal Award slightly. This recognition means a lot because it represents months of leadership, planning, and commitment. The applause started again. Then it abruptly stopped. The CEO stood up. Not dramatically. Not angrily. Just calmly. Yet the effect was immediate. Conversations disappeared. Forks paused halfway to plates. Even the musicians near the ballroom wall stopped moving. Ethan looked confused as the CEO approached the stage. For several seconds nobody spoke. Then the CEO accepted a microphone from the event coordinator. "Before we continue," he said, "I need clarification regarding this project." The room became completely silent. Ethan forced a smile. "Of course." The CEO held up his phone. "I have an email thread here showing project leadership assignments from January. I also have document histories identifying authorship of strategic planning materials. Can you explain the discrepancy between these records and the presentation we just watched?" Ethan's face lost color almost instantly. Across the ballroom, dozens of employees exchanged looks. They knew exactly what the CEO had discovered. Ethan attempted a response. "Well, the project was collaborative." The CEO interrupted politely. "Collaboration isn't the issue." He glanced down at his screen. According to these records, the majority of project architecture, forecasting models, vendor strategy, implementation planning, and executive reporting originated from one employee. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. My director looked as though he wanted the floor to open beneath him. Ethan swallowed visibly. "There may be context missing." The CEO nodded. "That's possible." Then he asked a question that changed everything. "Who is Olivia Hart?" My name echoed through the ballroom speakers. For the first time all evening, hundreds of people turned toward table 17. I remained seated. Calm. Quiet. exactly where I had been throughout the ceremony. The CEO looked directly at me. "Would you please join us?" Walking toward that stage felt surreal. Not because I felt victorious, because I finally realized the truth had become impossible to ignore. As I approached, Ethan stepped aside without being asked. The award suddenly looked much heavier in his hands. The CEO reviewed several files on his phone again before speaking. "These records appear exceptionally thorough." I nodded. I like documentation. A few nervous laughs spread through the room. The CEO smiled slightly. Then he opened the original email thread. Standing beneath the stage lights, I could feel hundreds of eyes following every movement. Yet the ballroom seemed strangely quiet. The CEO scrolled through the email chain displayed on his phone while event staff and executives waited awkwardly nearby. Then he handed the device to the large-screen technician. Seconds later, the first email appeared on the giant projection screen behind us. The timestamp read January 8th, 8:12 a.m. It showed the original project assignment memo. My name appeared under project lead. Ethan's appeared under supporting analyst. A ripple moved through the audience. The CEO advanced to the next message. Then another. Then another. One by one, months of documentation unfolded in front of everyone. There were strategic recommendations authored by me, vendor negotiations conducted by me, forecasting models created by me, executive summaries distributed by me, and approval responses from senior leadership acknowledging my work. Every file contained timestamps. Every email contained records. Every version history told the same story. Nobody needed an explanation because the evidence explained itself. Ethan stared at the screen without speaking. My director looked equally uncomfortable. The CEO finally lowered the microphone and addressed the room. "Leadership depends on trust. Recognition depends on accuracy. Tonight, neither standard was met." The statement landed harder than any public accusation could have. He wasn't raising his voice. He wasn't creating a scene. He was simply stating facts. Then he turned toward Ethan. "Did you ever correct the misunderstanding regarding project ownership?" Ethan hesitated. The silence answered the question before he spoke. "No." The CEO nodded once. "Thank you for your honesty." Next he faced my director. "Were you aware of these records?" My director shifted uncomfortably. "Not to this extent." Again, the answer told everyone what they needed to know. Several board members exchanged looks from their table near the stage. One quietly requested copies of the documentation. Another asked for a review of recent promotion recommendations. The atmosphere changed instantly. The gala had transformed from a celebration into an accountability meeting. Then something happened I never expected. The CEO picked up the Crystal Award from the podium. He looked at the audience for a moment before speaking. Recognition should reflect contribution. Turning toward me, he extended the award. "Olivia, congratulations." The ballroom erupted. This time the applause felt different. Not louder. More genuine. People weren't reacting to a polished speech or a carefully managed narrative. They were reacting to the truth. As I accepted the award, I noticed several coworkers smiling. Some looked relieved. Others looked vindicated. Many had known what happened for months but lacked the authority to challenge it. After the ceremony ended, executives approached me one after another. Conversations that had never happened suddenly became priorities. Board members requested meetings. Senior leaders asked questions about future expansion plans. Even employees from other departments introduced themselves and shared stories about seeing my work behind the scenes. The following Monday brought even larger consequences. Ethan was removed from leadership track development programs pending an internal review. My director lost responsibility for promotion recommendations until the investigation concluded. HR launched a formal audit of recognition and advancement practices across multiple departments. 3 weeks later, the board approved a new strategic operations division. I was asked to lead it. The promotion included a substantial salary increase, stock incentives, and direct access to executive leadership. Ethan eventually resigned. My director transferred to another department months later. As for me, I kept the Crystal Award on a shelf behind my desk, not because I needed the reminder, but because it represented something important. People often believe power comes from speaking the loudest. Sometimes it does, But that night proved something else. Documentation outlasts manipulation. Patience outlasts ego. And when the truth is carefully preserved, it eventually speaks for itself. A year later, I attended the same annual gala, but everything felt different. I wasn't sitting quietly at table 17 wondering whether my work would be recognized. I was leading a division that had become one of the company's most successful growth initiatives. The people who once overlooked me now requested meetings weeks in advance. New employees often assumed my career changed because of one dramatic night. The truth was much simpler. My life changed because I refused to panic when someone tried to rewrite my story. I stayed focused on facts when emotions would have been easier. Looking back, I don't feel angry at Ethan anymore. I don't even think about him very often. What stayed with me wasn't the betrayal. It was the lesson. The people who build false success spend their energy maintaining it. The people who build real success spend their energy creating it. Eventually, those paths lead to very different destinations. The award still sits on the shelf behind my desk, but my favorite part isn't what happened on stage. It's knowing that I never had to become loud, bitter, or reckless to win. I simply kept records and waited for the truth to arrive. If you've ever stayed silent while people underestimated you, subscribe. Because sometimes the strongest comeback begins the moment you stop arguing and start documenting.